Resolv might be the next gigantic stablecoin airdrop. And don't take my word for it. You can look at what Pendle implied yield is pricing this at. But let's dive in. Resolv is a stablecoin protocol very similar to Athena, and it's about to have an airdrop that could be really big, similar to Athena Season 1 and Usual Season 1 as well. How does it work? Well, it's a little bit different than both Usual and Athena, but closer to Athena in that it is currently backed by a basis trade mechanism. So if you don't know what a basis trade mechanism is, it basically means that there's a long leg. In this case, it's ETH and ETH derivatives that are generating yield, and a short leg to neutralize the delta of the long leg. So it's effectively a stablecoin that's generating yield. The short legs are perp positions on exchanges like Binance, Hyperliquid, and Deribit that are generating funding rates or funding fees. Those funding fees plus the yields of the long legs contribute to the total APR of the underlying portfolio. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Unlike Athena, where there's only one asset, one stablecoin minted against the portfolio, here there are two assets. One is USR and one is RLP. USR is the sort of true blue stablecoin. It is currently pegged exactly to $1, and it has 400, almost $500 million in TVL. This is what is called the senior tranche. Now, if you're familiar with TradFi, you know what that means. It means this is the risk-off sort of flagship product, and the risk is mitigated typically by the junior tranche. Now, the junior tranche will participate in the same underlying yield, but get more of it for taking on the risk of the strategy. So here we have a higher APR, 38.64%. It's also completely intrinsic yield. So instead of being a stablecoin pegged to $1 and you only get the yield if you stake it, here you just hold RLP and it increases in value over time. And you can see it's already increased by 14% since its inception. A pretty good 7-day APR, around 40%. So how does this work? What are the risks associated with the basis trade? I mean, Athena doesn't have a junior tranche to absorb any of the risk, and their peg is pretty good. So what's going on here? Well, same trade and effectively same risk profile, but Resolv decided to make a junior tranche just to mitigate any risks that there might be. And those risks are leg risk. So if you don't know what leg risk is, it's effectively the cost to open positions. Maybe there's slippage or price impact or swap fees, things like that that may affect your principal to some small or marginal degree. Those will get absorbed by RLP. Likewise, if funding does go negative, which effectively means that your basis trade is no longer paying you, but you have to pay to keep it open, that interest would eat into RLP and not into USR. And finally, any black swan events that do happen to the underlying protocols or assets of this portfolio would be absorbed by RLP and not USR. So RLP is the protective shield for USR, and that is why it gets a disproportionately large yield. Now, both of these assets are composable, and both of these assets are similar in feeling to a stablecoin in that they are backed and their interest increasing. Now, RLP is exposed to those risks, but otherwise it is not a volatile asset. It acts like a stablecoin that has intrinsic yield that goes up. Here's where things get interesting. There is a points campaign. Like I said, there's an up and coming airdrop, and you get different points for doing different activities. Now, the base just holding of USR, again, USR does not have any yield intrinsic to it. You have to stake it to get that yield. Just holding it gets you 30 points daily. Now, you may wonder what those 30 points are worth. And for that, I would go over to Sana's post. Sana, shout out to Sana, 0x Antifragile on Twitter. One of my favorite points speculators. They have speculated that these 30 points will be roughly valued at 33% additional APR. So just holding USR will entitle you to the value that will inevitably have been worth 33% APR after all the airdrops are said and done. Check out their write-up. This is only assuming a 500 million FDV, by the way, which I think may be a little bearish. So here, 33% for the 30x multiplier, and then you can sort of extrapolate the rest. So staking USR actually gets you 6% because it has a 5 points per dollar per day multiplier, and then RLP at 10 points per day per RLP gets you roughly an additional 11 to 12% on top of whatever yield there is. And so right now, RLP has a 38% intrinsic APR. You add 12% to that, you're getting 50% at the end of the day. Now, I'm not here just to tell you about Resolv. I'm here to also tell you about what you can do with these assets. And we're going to look at Euler. So Euler has a Resolv market. What does that mean? Well, it means that they have a curator. The curator is Apostro. Apostro has created this market and then worked directly with Resolv to get a bunch of liquidity in here. And you can therefore come here and leverage up USR, wrap staked USR, RLP, and even your wrap staked ETH if you'd like to, against things like USDC. This gets really interesting for a few reasons. One, you can leverage up your points. So any of those assets, USR, RLP, wrap staked USR, these are all generating those points we looked at earlier, but now you can leverage them against things like USDC. But the supply APY for USDC is pretty high. Well, why is that? It's currently being utilized at 93.66%. Now, this does go up and down, but what it really means is you can go on here and lend USDC, the bluest of all blue chip stablecoins, at a organic yield of 32.3%. So maybe you don't want to speculate on points. Maybe you don't really care about airdrops. You just want organic yield. You can go and lend USDC and get a base rate APR of 32.37% plus points. You're actually being given points for lending USDC on this very specific market. You're getting 5 points per dollar per day, which we just saw is might be around a 6% additional yield at a 500 million FDV. Now, if that actually is $1 billion FDV, if they overshoot their expectations, that would be an additional 12% APR. Likewise, the 30% APR, if they hit $1 billion FDV, it would be 60% APR, and that would just be absolutely wild. So what can you do here? Well, if RLP's supply APY is actually around 50%. This is so on Euler, you're going to get a real-time APR. On Resolv, you're getting a 7-day APR. So this is going to show you more of what it is right now, whereas the Resolv app is going to show you the 7-day average. So if you want to have a real-time APR, you can come to Euler and check out what they're saying the current intrinsic APR is. So 27% plus that 12 gets you around 40%. If you're leveraging 40% against 32%, you're roughly getting an 8% additional yield per leverage, and you can leverage this up as much as you like. Now, me personally, I would only leverage RLP at like a 50% LTV. Not recommending you do that, but that gives you like a 40% liquidation buffer. So RLP could drop 40% before you actually get liquidated. Again, I'm not recommending that. I'm just saying that if you are going to leverage RLP, which I personally think is a really interesting asset, please give yourself a huge buffer in case, worst case scenario, RLP actually does have to eat some of the risk of the underlying strategy. USR, much more risk off. Now, I will say Pendle also has a USR market. They're currently valuing the yield, which of USR is around 11%, plus this 30x point multiplier around 30% IY. Now that's kind of interesting. It's a different valuation that Sana's giving, and it might mean that these YTs are undervalued. Could be interesting. However, there is a caveat here. While it's currently getting 30 points per dollar per day, it will eventually get 15 points per dollar per day at a specific date, which I think is probably listed somewhere on the front end under the points market. It is kind of strange that they've segmented this. Nevertheless, the PT is interesting. This PT has a fixed rate, fixed date yield of around 31% APR. If you're unfamiliar with Pendle, my goodness, where have you been? Pendle allows you to either purchase the yield and the points of an asset without exposure to the underlying asset, or get a fixed rate, fixed date sort of bond on the underlying asset. So you're literally guaranteed the yield if you hold it to maturity. You would be guaranteed 31-ish% APR if you held to maturity, which is awesome. It's amazing. It's 70 days out. Imagine getting 30% APR on a stablecoin for roughly 80 days. that is wildly good. Now, last sort of bit on this, Apostro, who is the curator for this market, is going to bring that PT, 30% fixed rate, fixed date yield asset onto this market and also source some more liquidity. So if you're looking to leverage points, if you're looking to leverage RLP's intrinsic yield, if you're looking to lend USDC stablecoins, and soon, if you're looking to leverage the fixed rate, fixed date yield of Pendle, Euler's Resolv market will have that. So I think that's exciting. I do think that the points for Resolv are also interesting. Hopefully all of this makes sense to you guys. If you want to auto loop these things, you can. There's strategies. You can click on strategies and then go to the Resolv market and sort of look at what they're offering. Currently, you can loop the yield of USDC against USR, which to me is crazy. This means effectively you can get that lending yield of USDC and then borrow USR against it. So if you, again, have no interest whatsoever in points, lending or collateralizing USDC, borrowing USR, and then converting that to more USDC. So you're short USR, you're leverage long USDC, and getting an organic yield of around 50%. Why wouldn't you do that? Okay, I'm getting a little bit chilly. I hate to do it. I'm sorry, but this is exciting stuff as a nerd, as a yield farmer, and as someone who likes these sort of yield-bearing assets and new derivatives. So I think also, by the way, if you check out Sana's post, I'll link Sana's post in the description here. They believe that the airdrop is going to be sometime around February, so you do have a couple months to farm this, and really, let's see how they blow up. I'll also include a ref link down here for Resolv. You'll get 20% boost on all of your points. So, do with that number what you will and that math. And finally, I will say I am an ambassador for Euler, so I do have vested interest in boosting the strategies on their protocol, but I do genuinely think it is the most interesting place for leveraging USR and USR derivatives. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of your